All right, so have you heard about this whole U.S. sovereign wealth fund thing? Seems like everyone's talking about it, and we are going to dive deep. We got, well, we got the White House fact sheet. They're obviously pretty excited about it, but then you got, you know, skeptical Reddit threads, people raising some pretty serious questions, and then a bunch of news articles just trying to figure out, what's going on. So what is it? I guess you could think of it like a giant national savings account, kind of a state-owned investment fund to help America grow its wealth. But, that sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
But how's it going to actually work?
Yeah.
Especially, with where the U.S. economy is right now. Well, that's what we're going to try to figure out today.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that this, sovereign wealth funds are not new. They exist all over the world. Countries use them for all sorts of things, like Norway. They take all that extra money they make from oil and they put it into their fund. And then China, they use theirs to manage that huge trade surplus they have.
Right, and then this one really blew my mind. Singapore. They built these incredibly successful sovereign wealth funds. But they don't have oil or any other big natural resources. So how did they do that?
Well, I think a big part of it is, they focused on strategic long-term investments and they made sure to diversify their portfolio.
Yeah.
Really, that's key for any successful sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? But, and this is important, the U.S., we're in a pretty unique situation. I mean, we have this massive economy, a global powerhouse, really. But we're also running a pretty significant budget deficit. So the question is, where's the money for this fund going to come from? That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And that's where, the Reddit threads get really interesting, like even heated sometimes. Some people are saying, well, just redirect all those existing public sector subsidies. Apparently that's something like $50 billion every year. And others are like, just issue more government debt. The U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency. That's kind of like the gold standard for the whole world, right? So we can borrow money at these super low interest rates. And then, of course, there's always the idea of using the Social Security surplus, although it's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. Let's break down those options a little bit. So redirecting subsidies, on the surface.
Yeah.
It sounds like it could make government spending more efficient, but what would that actually mean? Would we have to cut important programs? How do you balance economic growth with, things like social safety nets? And there's the whole idea of issuing more debt. But, yeah, it might be tempting, especially with those low interest rates. But wouldn't that just add to our national debt, which is already pretty substantial? And then, Social Security.
Yeah.
Nobody can seem to agree on whether it's going to be around in the long run.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, funding this thing is complicated,
right,
to say the least. But then, on top of all that, the White House fact sheet threw in this curveball that's really got people talking. They suggested that this U.S. sovereign wealth fund could actually partially own TikTok. Now, funding aside, that whole TikTok thing has people, pretty fired up.
It's certainly an interesting idea. It seems to suggest that the U.S. government might be looking beyond just purely financial returns, right? Owning a platform as big as TikTok, that would give them a lot of influence over a really powerful communication channel. Some people think it's a way to counter China's growing influence in tech.
Yeah, I can see why that would raise some eyebrows.
Yeah.
But just think about it for a second. A government-backed entity owning part of a major social media platform, that's bound to make people worry about. Censorship, political bias, maybe even manipulation of information. And, some of those Reddit threads are already going down that rabbit hole. They're bringing up past financial controversies and questioning, how transparent this whole thing will actually be.
Those are valid concerns. For this fund to actually work and for people to trust it, it needs really strong governance structures to make sure it's independent from political whims and protected from corruption. It can't be seen as a tool for, political maneuvering or personal gain.
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency and accountability are going to be crucial every step of the way.
Yeah.
Especially considering, how big this fund is going to be and the potential influence it could have. But even beyond the practical stuff, there's this whole ideological clash happening in the Reddit discussion. Some people are like, cheering this fund on. They're saying it's a brilliant way to use capitalism to benefit the whole country. And then you have others who are totally against it. And they're saying it's a slippery slope towards socialism. I mean, talk about a polarized debate. It's wild.
It really shows you how divided people are about, the government's role in the economy. Should the government be, like an investor trying to boost the national wealth? Or is that, too much? Does it mess with free markets? This is a debate that's been going on forever. And this sovereign wealth fund idea, it's definitely adding fuel to the fire.
Everyone's got an opinion, right?
Yeah.
They're all, shouting it from the rooftops. But, okay, let's say, just for a second, that this fund actually happens. Where should they invest the money? What should their priorities be? Because that's that's a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely. The investment strategy is crucial. It has to, it has to be aligned with their goals. What are they trying to achieve? Are they just looking for financial returns? Or are they trying to stimulate economic growth? Or maybe, a little bit of both. These are not easy questions to answer.
Well, if you look at the Reddit threads, it seems like everyone's got their,
Cool.
their favorite cause. You've got the A Better Future crowd.
Yeah.
They're all about investing in renewable energy, infrastructure, that kind of thing. They're saying the fund should be used to fight climate change and, make sure the U.S. stays competitive in the global tech race.
Yeah.
And then you have others who are, more traditional. They're saying, stick to the basics. Invest in stocks, bonds, real estate. The things that have always worked to maximize returns.
Right. And that's just the beginning. You also have people pushing for investments in, cutting edge technology like artificial intelligence, biotech, and then there's the whole social impact investing movement. They want to see the money go towards things like addressing inequality, reducing poverty, tackling other social challenges. It's a really complex landscape, and ultimately, I think the final decision is going to be influenced by, well, a lot of things: political ideologies, the economy, even, geopolitics.
Yeah, it's crazy. One Redditor even suggested putting a bunch of the money into Bitcoin. They think the dollar is on its way out.
Yeah.
And the cryptocurrency is the future. Pretty bold idea, right? Maybe even reckless. But it shows you how worried people are about, the traditional financial system.
It definitely reflects how much the financial landscape is changing. Cryptocurrencies are, they're definitely volatile, but they are gaining traction. And some people see them as a way to protect themselves from inflation or even, as a potential challenge to the dollar's dominance. It's a conversation that's not going away.
No, it's definitely not. I think it's pretty clear that this whole U.S. sovereign wealth fund idea, it's really hitting a nerve. It's making people think about some really big questions, not just about money, but about the role of government, the future of finance, and ultimately, what kind of country we want to be.
It's interesting that the U.S. is kind of late to the game with this. A lot of other countries already have sovereign wealth funds. On the one hand, that could be an advantage for us. We can learn from what they've done and try to avoid making the same mistakes. But it also means we're playing catch-up in the global investment arena.
Yeah, and some of the news articles we looked at, they were worried about how a U.S. fund might affect global markets. I mean, think about it. The U.S. economy is huge. Even a relatively small fund could have a big impact.
Oh, absolutely. The U.S. government would have to be very careful. They'd need to avoid anything that looks like, market manipulation or unfair competition. Transparency would be key. Yeah. And they'd need to work closely with other countries.
Yeah. It's a high-stakes game. And there are no easy answers. Setting up a fund and investing the money, that's just the first step. The real challenge is figuring out all the political and economic complexities, balancing everyone's interests, and ultimately, making smart decisions that will shape the future of the U.S. economy.
But in the middle of all this, it's important to remember who this is supposed to benefit: the American people. It's their money, their future.
Right. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this isn't just, some abstract economic theory. This fund, if it actually happens, could have a real impact on people's lives.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If the fund invests a lot in renewable energy, it could help us transition to a cleaner economy, create new jobs, maybe even lower your energy bills.
But then again, if it focuses on certain industries or companies, it could give them an unfair advantage, maybe even drive up prices for consumers.
And we can't forget about the potential for, direct financial benefits. If the fund makes a lot of money, that could lead to lower taxes, more spending on social programs, maybe even direct payments to citizens.
Wow. Those are some pretty big possibilities. It just shows you why it's so important to, be part of this conversation.
Yeah.
To speak your mind and to make sure your elected officials are making decisions that benefit everyone, not just a select few. It feels like, we've just scratched the surface here. This is something people would be talking about for years. I mean, this whole idea, it makes you think about some really big questions.
Yeah.
About the role of government, the future of finance, even what we consider like national wealth.
It's true. We've talked about funding sources, investment strategies, the political battles, the ideological debates. We've looked at facts, opinions, even some pretty out there ideas. But I think this deep dive it's raised some really fundamental questions that we as a country
Right.
need to answer.
Yeah, like, what is the government's role when it comes to managing national wealth?
Mm.
Is it ethical for the government to have its own investment fund? And maybe the biggest question of all, what kind of future do we want? And how can this fund, assuming it actually happens, how can it help us get there?
These are questions worth thinking about,
Yeah.
debating,
Mhm.
and ultimately, using to make informed decisions. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just some theoretical thing. This fund
Right.
it could have a real impact on your life, your finances, your
Yeah.
future.
Exactly. So, now we want to hear from you. If this U.S. sovereign wealth fund actually becomes a reality,
Mhm.
what would you want to see it invest in? What are you hoping for? What are you worried about?
What's your vision for the future, and how do you think this fund could help us build that future? Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep the conversation going, because the decisions we make today are
They're going to have a big impact on the world of tomorrow.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been a fascinating deep dive. Honestly, a little bit mind-blowing. So much to consider here, so much at stake. But that's what makes it so important to be informed, to engage in these discussions, and to make sure your voice is heard. Thanks for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.